Okay, we're going to read chapter 8, but let's talk about chapter 7. That's where that gross mother almost cooked him in the pot. Well, first of all, those bugs tried to get him out of the underground fungus farm. And then he ran, and then he got in that bucket, and then the bucket went up, and the gross mother put him in the pot. And then remember all those, what are they called? The goblins got mad at her and threw her down the chute, and then he ran away. And he got out, but now they're sad because there's no one there to make their pink soup or whatever it is. Okay, so then he just left and walked into the Deepwoods. The Bander Bear. Twig undid the toggles of his fleecy jacket as he walked on. The wind had changed direction, and there was an autumnal feel to the air. That means kind of cool. The weather was as unpredictable as everything else in the treacherous Deepwoods. All around him, the forest was dripping as a recent fall of snow rapidly melted from the canopy above. Still hot, Twig stopped, closed his eyes, and turned his face upward. The icy water splashed onto his face. It was cool and refreshing. Suddenly, something large and heavy struck Twig's head. Boof! So hard that he was knocked to the ground. He lay still, not daring to look. What had hit him? The Gloamglozer? Could the fearsome creature really exist? If it did, it was no use cowering. Twig opened his eyes, jumped to his feet, and drew his knife. "Where are you?" he screamed. "Show yourself!" Nothing appeared. Nothing at all. And the only sound to be heard was the steady drip, drip, drip from the trees. Then came the second boof. Twig spun around, and a huge pillow of snow, which must have slipped from the branches overhead, had completely flattened a comb bush. Twig put his hand up. There was snow in his hair. There was snow all around him. He started to laugh. "Snow," he said. "That's all it was, just snow." The dripping increased as Twig continued on his way. Like heavy rain it was, pouring down below. Twig was soon wet through, and as he trudged deeper into the Deepwoods, the ground became more and more boggy. Every step became an effort made all the worse by hunger. "With the slaughterers," he muttered. "That was the last time I had a proper meal, and Sky knows how long ago that was." Twig looked up. The sun was bright and even. Down on the diamond-dappled forest floor, he could feel its ripening warmth. Fragile twists of mist were coiling up from the soggy soil, and as the hamel-horn skin dried out, Twig himself began to steam. His hunger was impossible to ignore. It squirmed and gnawed inside his stomach. It growled impatiently. I know," said Twig, "and as soon as I find something, you can have it. The trouble is, what?" When he came to a tree heavy with a deep, dark purple harvest, he stopped. Some of the round, plump pieces of fruit were so ripe they had split their skins and were dripping golden juice. Twig licked his lips. The fruit looked so juicily sweet, so succulently delicious. He reached up and clasped one. It was soft to the touch and came away from its stalk with a slurp. Twig turned it over in his hand. He polished it on his furry waistcoat. Slowly he brought it to his mouth and, "No!" he said. "I dare not!" And he hurled the fruit away. His stomach gurgled angrily. "You'll have to wait," Twig snapped and marched grimly on, muttering under his breath about how dumb he'd been even to consider eating something unknown. For although many of the fruits and berries in the Deepwoods were sweet and nourishing, many, many more were deadly. Kind of looks like a pear. A single drop of juice from the rose heart apple, for instance, was enough to kill you on the spot. And death was far from the only danger. There was fruit which could blind you, fruit which could explode inside you, fruit which could leave you paralyzed. There was one, the scrapewort berry, which brought you out in a warty blue rash that never disappeared. And there was another, the pipsap, which shrank those who ate it. The more you ate, the smaller you became. Those unfortunates who had too many disappeared altogether. Much too dangerous, Twig said to himself. I'll just have to hang on till I come to a tree I recognize. Yet as Twig continued through the deep woods, of all the countless different types of tree he saw, there wasn't a single one that looked familiar. This is what comes of growing up with wood trolls, he sighed wearily. Since they never strayed from the path, the wood trolls relied on others to provide them with fruit from the deep woods. They were barterers, not foragers. Now more than ever before, Twig wished this were not the case. Trying hard to ignore his stomach's protests, Twig tramped on. His body felt heavy, but his head was oddly light. Mouth-watering fragrances wafted towards him from the fruit trees, while the fruits themselves seemed to glow enticingly. For hunger is a curious creature. It dulls the brain, but heightens the senses, and when a twig cracked far away in front of him, Twig heard it as though it had broken right beside him. He stopped dead and peered ahead. Someone or something was there. Twig advanced, taking care not to tread on any of the brittle twigs himself. Closer he went, darting from tree to tree. He heard something moan close by and crouched down out of sight. Then, heart chugging, he edged slowly forwards, peered nervously around, and found himself face to face with a huge and hairy mountain of a beast. Here it is right here. It was rubbing the side of his furry face gently with one massive clawed paw. When their eyes met, the creature threw back his head, bared his teeth, and howled at the sky. "Oh!" Twig screamed and scrambled back behind the tree. Shaking with fear, he heard the splinter and crack of snapping branches as the beast lumbered off, crashing its way through the undergrowth. All at once the noise stopped, and the air filled with a plaintive yodel. The next instant, from far away, a second voice yodeled in reply. "Banderbears," said Twig. He'd heard them often enough before, but this was the first Twig had seen. It was even bigger than he'd imagined. Although prodigiously large and strong, the Banderbear was a timid creature. Its large, doleful eyes were said to see the world larger than it really is. Twig peeked around the tree again. The Banderbear was gone. A trail of crushed vegetation led back into the forest. "That's one path I won't be taking," he said. He froze to the spot. The Banderbear had not gone. It was standing there, not 10 paces away. With its pale green fur, it was almost perfectly camouflaged. "Whoa!" It groaned softly and raised a giant paw to his cheek. "Whoa, whoa!" The creature was truly massive, at least twice as tall as Twig himself, and built like a vast pyramid. It had tree trunk legs and arms so long its knuckles grazed the ground. The 4 claws at the end of each limb were all as long as Twig's forearms, as were the 2 tusks that curved up from his jutting lower jaw. Only its ears, delicate wing-like objects constantly on the flutter, did not look as though they had been hewn from rock. The Banderbear fixed Twig with his sad eyes. "What? It groaned again. It was in pain, that much was clear. Despite his size, it looked oddly vulnerable. Twig knew it must need his help. He took a step forwards. The Banderbear did the same. Twig smiled. "What's the matter?" he said. The Banderbear opened his mouth wide and prodded around clumsily inside with a single claw. Twig swallowed nervously. "Let me see," he said. The Banderbear came closer. It moved by placing both paws on the ground and swinging its hind legs forwards. As it approached, Twig was surprised to see gray-green moss growing in his fur. It was this that made the Banderbear appear green. "Whoa!" it grunted as it stopped in front of the boy. It opened its mouth, and Twig was struck with a blast of putrid warm air. He winced and turned his face away. "Whoa!" the Banderbear grunted impatiently. Twig looked up. I can't reach that high," he explained, "even on tiptoes. You'll have to lie down," he said, and pointed at the ground. The Banderbear nodded its enormous head and lay at Twig's feet. And as Twig looked down into the huge, sorrowful eyes, he saw something unexpected quivering there in the dark green depths. It was fear. "Open wide," Twig said softly, and he opened his own mouth to show what he meant. The Banderbear followed suit. Twig found himself staring into the creature's cavernous mouth, over the rows of savage teeth, and down the gaping tunnel of its throat. Then he saw it. At the back of the mouth, on the left, a tooth so rotten it had turned from yellow to black. "Sky above!" Twig exclaimed. "No wonder you're in pain." "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa!" the Banderbear groaned and tugged his hand repeatedly away from his mouth. "You want me to pull it out?" said Twig. The Banderbear nodded, and a large tear rolled down from the corner of each eye. "Be brave," Twig whispered. "I'll try not to hurt." Here's a picture. I think he's standing on the other side of him. He knelt down, rolled up his sleeve, and took a closer look at the inside of the Banderbear's mouth. The tooth, though dwarfed by the two huge tusks, was still the size of a small mustard pot. It was nestling in gum so red and swollen it looked ready to burst. Twig reached gingerly in and clasped the rotten tooth. The Banderbear immediately flinched and turned sharply away. One razor-sharp tusk scraped across Twig's arm, drawing blood. "Yow! Don't do that!" he shouted. "If you want me to help you, you must keep perfectly still. Got that?" "Whoa, whoa," the Banderbear mumbled. Twig tried again. This time, although his huge eyes narrowed with pain, the Banderbear did not move as Twig grasped the tooth. "Tug and twist," he instructed himself as he tightened his grip on the pitted tooth. He braced himself. "Ready? 3, 2, 1, now!" he yelled. Twig tugged and twisted. He tugged so hard he toppled backwards, wrenching the tooth around as he did so. It juddered and rasped at the root as the roots were torn from the gum. Blood and pus spurted out. Ugh. Twig crashed down to the ground. In his hands was the tooth. The Banderbear leaped up, eyes flashing furiously. It bared its teeth. It beat its chest. It shattered the silence of the Deepwoods with a deafening roar. Then, overcome with a terrible rage, it began tearing wildly at the surrounding forest. Bushes were uprooted, trees knocked down. Twig stared in horror. The pain must have driven the creature crazy. He struggled to his feet and tried to slip away before the beast could turn his fury on him. But he was already too late. The Banderbear had caught sight of him out of the corner of its eye. It swung around. It tossed aside an uprooted sapling. "Whoa!" it bellowed, and bounded toward him, all wild eyes and glinting teeth. "No!" Twig whispered, terrified that he was about to be torn limb from limb. The next instant, the Banderbear was upon him. He felt its massive arms wrapping themselves around his body and smelled the musty odor of mossy fur as he was crushed against the creature's belly. And there the two of them remained, the boy and Banderbear, hugging each other gratefully in the dappled light of the Deepwoods afternoon. Here's a picture. I think he's thanking him. "Whoa, whoa," said the Banderbear at last, and loosened its arms. It pointed inside its mouth and scratched its head questioningly. "Your tooth?" said Twig. "I've got it here." And he held it out to the Banderbear on the palm of his hand. Delicately, for one so immense, the Banderbear took the tooth and wiped it on its fur. Then it held it up to the light so that Twig could see the hole which had been eaten right the way through. Whoa, it said, and touched the amulets around Twig's neck. It handed the tooth back. You want me to wear it around my neck? Said Twig. Whoa, said the bear. Whoa, whoa. For good luck? Said Twig. The Bandar Bear nodded, and when Twig had slipped it onto the thong that with Spelda's lucky charms, it nodded again, satisfied. Twig smiled. Feel better now? He said. The Bandar Bear nodded solemnly. Then it touched its chest and extended its arm toward Twig. Is there something you can do for me in return? Said Twig. Not half. I'm starving, he said. Food, food, he added, and patted his stomach. The Bandar Bear looked puzzled. What? It grunted, and swung its arm around in a wide arc. But I don't know what is safe to eat, Twig explained. Good? Bad? He said, pointing to different fruits. The Bandar Bear beckoned and led him across to a tall bell-shaped tree with pale green leaves and bright red fruit, so ripe it was dripping. Twig licked his lips greedily. The Bandar Bear reached up, plucked a single piece of fruit in its claws, and held it out for Twig. Whoa, it grunted insistently, and patted his own stomach. The fruit was good. Twig should eat. Twig took the fruit and bit into it. It was more than good. It was delicious, sweet, succulent, and with a hint of wood ginger. When it was gone, he turned to the Bandar Bear and patted his stomach again. More, he said. Whoa, grinned the Bandar Bear. They made an odd couple, the furry mountain and the stick boy, and occasionally Twig would ask himself why the Bandar Bear stuck around. After all, it was so big and strong and knew so much about the secrets of the Deepwoods that it didn't need Twig. Maybe it too had felt lonely. Maybe it was grateful to him for pulling out the aching tooth, or maybe it was simply that the Bandar Bear liked him. Twig hoped so. Certainly he liked the Bandar Bear. He liked him more than anyone he had ever known. More than Taghair, more than Gristle, more than Hodder Gruff, when the two had still been friends. How far away and long ago his life with the wood trolls seemed. Twig realized that by now Cousin Snetterbark must have sent word that he hadn't arrived. What must they be thinking? He knew what Tum-Tum's gruff response would be. Strayed from the path, he would hear his father saying. Always knew he would. He was never a wood troll. His mother was too soft on him. Twig sighed. Poor Spelda. He could see her face wet with tears. I told him, she would weep. I told him to stay on the path. We loved him like one of our own. But Twig wasn't truly one of theirs. He didn't belong, not with the wood trolls, nor with the slaughterers, and certainly not with the sticky honeycombs of the Guile Goblin colony. Perhaps this was where he belonged, with the lonely old Bandar Bear in the endless Deepwoods, wandering from meal to meal, sleeping in the soft, safe, secret places that only Bandar Bears know, always on the move, never staying in one place for long, and never following a path. Sometimes when the moon rose above the ironwood pines, the Bandar Bear would stop and sniff the air, its small ears fluttering and its eyes half closed. Then it would take a deep breath and let out a forlorn yodeling call into the night air. From far, far away there would come a reply, another solitary Bandar Bear calling back across the vastness of the Deepwoods. Perhaps one day they would stumble across each other, perhaps not. That was the sorrow in their song. It was a sorrow Twig understood. Bandar Bear, he said, one sweltering afternoon. What? The Bandar Bear replied, and Twig felt a giant paw on his shoulder, powerful yet gentle. Why do we never meet the Bandar Bears you call to at night? He asked. The Bandar Bear shrugged. That was simply the way it was. It reached up and picked a green star-shaped fruit from a tree. It prodded it, sniffed it, and growled. No good, said Twig. The Bandar Bear shook its head, split the fruit open with his claw, and let it drop to the ground. Twig looked round. What about them? He said, pointing up to a small round yellow fruit dangling far above his head. The Bandar Bear stretched up and pulled off a branch, sniffing all the while. It turned the fruit over and over in its massive paws. Then it gently removed an individual fruit from the bunch, nicked the skin with his claw, and sniffed it. Finally, he touched the bead of syrup against the tip of his long black tongue and smacked his lips. "Whoa, whoa," it said at last, and handed the whole bunch over. "Wonderful," Twig slurped. How lucky he was to have the Banderbear show him what he could and couldn't eat. He pointed to himself, then to the Banderbear. "Friends," he said. The Banderbear pointed to himself, and then to Twig. "Whoa," he said. Twig smiled. High above him, but low in the sky, the sun sank, and the light in the forest turned from lemon yellow to rich golden glow that poured through the leaves like warm syrup. He yawned. "I'm tired," he said. "Whoa?" said the Banderbear. Twig pressed his hands together and rested the side of his head against them. "Sleep," he said. The Banderbear nodded. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," it said. As they set off, Twig smiled to himself. When they had first met, the Banderbear's snoring had kept him awake. Now he would have found it hard to fall asleep without the comforting rumble beside him. They continued walking, with Twig following the path that the Banderbear made through the dense undergrowth. Passing a spiky blue-green bush, Twig reached out absent-mindedly and picked a couple of the pearly white berries that grew in clusters at the base of each spike. He popped one of them in his mouth. "Are we nearly there?" he asked. The Banderbear turned. "What?" it said. Suddenly its wide eyes grew narrow and its wispy ears began to flap. "Whoa!" it roared and made a lunge at the boy. What was the matter now? Had the Banderbear gone crazy again? Twig turned on his heels and leaped out of the way of the massive beast as it hurtled towards him. It could crush him without even meaning to. The Banderbear crashed to the ground, flattening the vegetation. "Whoa!" it roared again and swung at him savagely. The blow caught Twig on the arm. It sent him spinning around. His hand opened and the pearly berry flew off into the undergrowth. Twig landed on the ground with a bump. He looked up. The Banderbear was towering above him menacingly. Twig went to scream. As he did so, the other berry, the one in his mouth, slid back and lodged itself in the back of his throat, and there it remained. Twig coughed and sputtered, but the berry would not shift. His face went from pink to red to purple as he gasped for air. He staggered to his feet and stared up at the Banderbear. Everything was beginning to swim in front of his eyes. "Can't breathe!" he groaned and clutched his throat. "Whoa!" the Banderbear cried out. He grabbed Twig by the ankles. Twig felt himself being hoisted upside down into the air. The Banderbear's heavy paw began pummeling his back. Again and again it thumped down, but still the berry would not budge. Again and again, pop! The berry shot out of Twig's mouth and bounced across the ground. Whew! Twig gasped and gulped for air. Panting uncontrollably, he squirmed and wiggled upside down in the Banderbear's grasp. "Down!" he rasped. The Banderbear scooped Twig up with his free arm and lay him gently on the pile of dry leaves. It crouched low and pushed his face up close. "Whoa?" it said. Twig looked into the concerned face of the Banderbear. Its eyes were open wider than ever. It frowned questioningly. Twig smiled and wrapped his arms around the Banderbear's neck. "Whoa," it said. Oh man, he just saved him from being poisoned, huh? The Banderbear pulled away and looked Twig in the eye. Then it turned and pointed at the berry that had so nearly choked him. "Whoa," it said angrily, clutching its stomach and rolled on its back in mock agony. Twig nodded solemnly. The berry was also poisonous. "Not good," he said. "Whoa," said the Banderbear, leaping to his feet. "Whoa," it cried, and jumped up and down, and as it continued to pummel and pound the offending berry, the trampled vegetation all around was shredded, and the ground beneath flew up in clouds of dust. Tears of laughter streamed down Twig's face. "It's okay," he said. "I promise." The Banderbear came over and patted Twig gently on the head. "Whoa, friends," it said. "That's right," Twig smiled. "Friends." He pointed to himself again. "Twig," he said. "Say it. Twig." Twug. said the Banderbear, beamed proudly. Twug, 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 it said over and over, and it stooped down, seized the boy, and swung him up onto its shoulders. Together they lurched off into the darkening woods. It wasn't long before Twig was foraging for himself. He wasn't as skillful as the Banderbear, with its giant claws and sensitive nose, but he learned quickly, and the Deepwoods gradually became a less frightening place. All the same, in the dark black night, it was a comfort to feel the great heaving bulk of the Banderbear beside him, its gruff snores soothing him back to sleep. Twig thought about his wood troll family less and less. He hadn't forgotten them exactly. It was just that there didn't seem any need to think much about anything. Eat, sleep, eat some more. Every now and then, though, Twig was jolted out of the Deepwoods dream. Once when he saw a sky ship in the distance, and a few times when he thought he saw the caterbird in the dappled branches of lullaby trees. But life went on. They ate and slept and yodeled at the moon, and then it happened. It was a crisp autumnal evening, and Twig was once again up on the Banderbear's shoulders. They were searching out a sleeping place for the night when suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Twig saw a flash of orange. He glanced around. Some way behind them was a small furry creature, like a ball of orange fluff. A little further on, Twig looked around for a second time. Now there were 4 of the fluffy little creatures, all frisking about like Hamelhorn lambs. Sweet, he said. What? said the Banderbear. Behind us, Twig said, tapping the Banderbear on the shoulder and pointing. The pair of them turned. By now there were a dozen of the curious animals, all bouncing along after them. When it caught sight of the creatures, the Banderbear's ears began swiveling around and around, and from its mouth came a soft but high-pitched squeal. What is it? Said Twig, and chuckled. You're not going to tell me that you're frightened of them? The Banderbear only squealed all the louder and trembled from the ends of its ears to the tip of its toes. Wig, wig, the Banderbear bellowed. As Twig watched, the number of fluffy orange creatures doubled, then doubled again. They scampered about in the twilight glow, this way and that, but never getting any nearer. The Banderbear grew more and more agitated. It shuffled about nervously from foot to foot, squealing all the while. Suddenly, it had had enough. Whoa, whoa, it cried. Twig gripped the Banderbear's long hair and held on tightly as it lurched forwards. It trundled blindly through the forest. Bump, bump, bump. It was all Twig could do not to fall off. He glanced behind him. There was no doubt about what was happening. The orange balls of fluff were giving chase. Oh, here's a picture. They're really little. Okay. Twig's own heart was racing now. On their own, the little creatures had looked sweet, but as a group, there was something curiously menacing about them. Faster and faster the Banderbear went. It crashed through the woods, flattening everything before it. Time and again, Twig had to duck down behind its huge head as branches and bushes came hurtling towards him. The wigwigs simply followed the path the great beast was carving, and it wasn't long before the ones at the front were catching up. Twig looked down anxiously. 4 or 5 of the creatures were now leaping at the Banderbear's feet. Every time the Banderbear's feet touched the ground, suddenly one of them clung on. Oh! Sky above! Twig gasped as the fluffy ball split in half and 2 rows of savage teeth, like the jags of the bear's trap, sprang into view. Oh my gosh, look how scary it looks. Ah! Okay. Oh my gosh, it's so scary. Okay. The next instant, the teeth slammed shut on the Banderbear's leg. Whoa! It screeched. With Twig still clinging on for grim death, the Banderbear leaned over and tore the wigwig off and tossed it away. The ferocious little beast rolled back over the ground, only to be replaced by 4 more. Squash them! Crush them! Twig screamed, but it was hopeless. No matter how many of the wigwigs the Banderbear sent flying through the air, there were always a dozen or more to take their place. They clung to its legs, to its arms. They crawled up its back toward the Banderbear's neck, up towards Twig. Help me! He screamed. The Bandy-Bear jerked abruptly upright and stumbled over to a tall tree. Twig felt its huge paws around his waist as it pulled him from its shoulders and placed him high up into the branches of the tree, far out of reach of the bloodthirsty wigwigs. Twig, it said, friends. You climb up too, said Twig. But as he looked back into the Bandy-Bear's sad eyes, he knew that would never be possible. The wigwigs bit into the Bandy-Bear's legs again and again, until finally, with a low moan, the huge beast toppled down to the ground. Oh, its body was immediately covered with the vicious creatures. Twig's eyes filled with tears. He turned away, unable to look. He clamped his hands over his ears, but couldn't shut out the cries of the Bandy-Bear as it battled on. Then the Deepwoods fell silent. Twig knew it was all over. Oh, Bandy-Bear, he sobbed. Why? He wanted to jump down and knife unsheathed and kill every single one of those wigwigs. He wanted to avenge the death of his friend, yet he knew all too well that there was not a thing he could do. Twig wiped his eyes and looked down. The wigwigs had gone, and of the Bandy-Bear there wasn't a trace to be seen. Not a bone, not a tooth or claw, not a single scrap of the mossy fur. From far away there came a forlorn, yodeling call of a distant Bandy-Bear. Time after time, its heart-wrenching cry echoed through the trees. Twig held the tooth around his neck tightly in his hand. He sniffed. It can't answer you now, he whispered, or ever again. There's the tooth. Dawn, dawn, dawn. Oh my gosh, that was a sad chapter. The next chapter is called The Rot Sucker.